Mic check. Check. Testing.
1, 2. Mic check. Okay. So is this on?
It's coming through the street. It's just not on my computer.
Okay.
So it's picking up this one too? Okay. I'll just keep this here then. I'll leave this off still. I'll probably totally. And then just save this for the second.
Is it coming from your computer? Well, we could probably use it. He's up to 29.
Is the voting meeting too?
That's one of the 4 times.
Oh.
Oh no, it might be coming from your computer.
Started in just a couple of minutes. Denise is doing a hallway for this program, so it'll be very shortly.
It's on that sheet if we do. It's not on that sheet then.
Hi.
I'll have it here for sure.
to see,
Okay.
so as long as you're like, you know, somewhere near, cause you can even be here and it'll pick you up. You
Oh,
just don't wanna go too far
okay.
from there, and when we do the Q&A, I will have a handheld that I will pass
Okay.
around because that way both of you are here. So yeah, here's the slide clicker, it's all set up. I'm gonna go ahead and get started.
Sure.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us in our last presentation for our Celebrating Wichita's Black History series. And with us today, we have Denise Sherman, who is the Executive Director for the Kansas African American Museum, not too far from here. And she's going to talk to us about Kansas Trailblazers. And she can expand a little bit more on that, but we're very excited to have her here. And before I go on to introduce her, I just want to mention a couple of things. Before you leave today, feel free to fill out a evaluation form for us. We have a little sign with a QR code, or you can do a paper form. And that lets us know if you want us to keep doing programs like this, whether or not it's during Black History Month, because this is something that, you know, we want to be able to do all year round. That's how we find out what you think of our programs and how we can improve them. So please fill that out if you get a chance. And also, if you had any friends or family members that were not able to come to today's program, you can let them know that we will have this on our YouTube channel to watch later. So be sure to let them know. So with us today, like I mentioned, we have Denise Sherman. Denise serves as the Executive Director for the Kansas African American Museum, where she provides leadership by strategically focusing on the African American story. Using technology and innovative ideas, Denise has retooled and upgraded educational programs for virtual and online access, developed new cultural awareness and enrichment programming in response to DEI, social and political climate, as well as moderated and participated in panel discussions with community leaders regarding sensitive, relevant, and compelling issues and topics. Ms. Sherman credits her Master of Science in Organizational Development degree in recognizing TCAM to serve as a cultural hub for the state of Kansas. I'm very pleased to introduce to you Denise Sherman.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I see some familiar faces. Some of our supporters from the Kansas African American Museum are here with us. I see some new faces today. So if you have not had a chance to join us at the museum, we invite you to do so. So first of all, today, during the last day of Black History Month, we were asked to share a little bit of information. And you know, there's around this topic, Trailblazers, there are so many things that we can share. And so I'm going to just briefly go through a few that we have selected just as a point of interest. But to get a deep dive, we ask that you take time to do your own research or come down and visit us and learn more. So with that being said, how many people have been to the museum? And who has not? Well, we invite you to come today. You have your formal invitation. Let's see how this works here. So this is our location, and this is hundreds to around 1952 when the church, 72 when the church moved to its new location on North Hillside. It became the first National Black Historical Society. And for 25 years, it served in that capacity after being a church for about 50 years. With that, this building is now serving as the Kansas African American Museum as of about 1997. And so that has been our transition so far. Again, here's a front view of the building. And then kind of the marker that shows that it was initially the church, Calvary Baptist Church, which by the way was really originally called Second Baptist Church before it became Calvary. So, at the Kansas African American Museum, this is our mission statement, which we think we've almost outgrown and probably need to look at positioning this a little bit. But the Kansas African American Museum endeavors to make the African American experience relevant and resonate with every Kansan. But what we found over the last couple of years as we have expanded our programming and look for new ways to share information, we've actually become global, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. So it's more than every Kansan, it's everyone. One of the things that we have done in the most recent years was determine what our positioning statement would be and how we would work within the community and abroad. And so with this, We Are Culture is our all-encompassing statement that involves inclusivity of everyone, because African American history is Kansas history, is your history. No matter how you just try to segment it or compartmentalize it, it is all intertwined and interconnected, and it's so important that everyone knows all about history. And so with that, this involves everyone to be a part of it. From that, we operate under these 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars help us stay focused on mission fulfillment. It helps us stay in the space that we feel that we are most advantageous. And our pillars are basically centered around our history, which is our heritage and the legacy of this community, our art and our artifacts, as well as even as much as performing arts, which we delved into the last couple of years, education, services, and programs such as this, education K through 12, education with our higher learning entities, and then also with our faith-based groups. And so we get people coming in all the time, maybe on a particular topic or something that they want to discuss, or maybe there is a question or a subject that is important, and we can tailor some of those things around that. And then cultural awareness and cultural enrichment. And as we've had this DE&I focus the last several years, and as we're exploring some of the things that are happening in our society, cultural awareness and cultural enrichment is important for everyone. If you are not steadily working on that, you actually become complacent about who and where things are and who is around you. And that's not a good thing to be. So cultural enrichment is very, very important, but it starts with cultural awareness. You need to be aware that, first of all, you may not know a lot about others, and how do you go forward with learning. Our cultural awareness and enrichment programs are also our immersive programs. And so this is where we look for ways for people to really get an opportunity to be involved in the engagement, some form or fashion. And so one of the things about Wichita and even Kansas we talk about is how did we come about as far as African Americans locating to Wichita and to Kansas. And so some of you may know the story of the Exoduster movement, late 1800s. Did you have a question?
Yeah, day before yesterday was Heritage Day for Nicodemus.
Yes, absolutely. And Nicodemus is actually a big part of this story. And I believe Angela Bates actually does quite a bit of speaking on that as one of the descendants of Nicodemus. Thank you for bringing that up. But this is one of the advertisements to recruit African Americans to Kansas during the Reconstruction period to locate into this land of milk and honey, as it was positioned, or this new free state. And so with that, this gentleman here, Benjamin Pap Singleton, was instrumental in making that happen. And as people were relocating here, they really found a different terrain, a different lifestyle than what they were used to. We're talking about folks from Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, from the South. And if you could imagine coming from those states as an agriculturalist, if you would, being in the spaces that free slaves are now in, that you free people are now in, you could see that Kansas is probably a big, big difference. Some of them stayed and some of them went back. But those who stayed forged on. And so again, Nicodemus, and thank you again for sharing that, is the only settlement that is still in existence from that original period that is part of west of the Mississippi. Again, I went through the timeline a little bit of the Kansas African American Museum, starting in 1917 in our current church, our current location, moving towards the first National Black Historical Society, which took place for 25 years between 1972 to 1997, and now to the Kansas African American Museum. So I want to share just a little bit about this young lady, Doris Kerr Larkins, who was very instrumental in part of our history and heritage of the museum, and particularly the building. She was a member of Calvary Baptist Church. When the building was set for demolition, she, her family, and members of the church protested about that, made sure that that building was not demolished, while other buildings in that area were being torn down. And so she has been very instrumental when we talk about folks who are a trailblazer, who rise up during an occasion when something is presented to you and decide that they're going to take a risk or move forward. She was definitely the one. She was the organist at the church. If you talk with some of her family members and some of those who knew her, what a wonderful woman she was. But she saw the need, she took care of it by standing up and being vocal about it, which has now left a wonderful legacy for us. So when we talk about Trailblazers, I just want to share a little bit about the Trailblazer event or the Trailblazer program that we have, because there's many different things that we do at the museum. But the Trailblazer program is where we actually honor and induct into our society, the Trailblazers Hall of Fame, individuals who have made significant contributions to society in some form or fashion, mainly in their area of expertise or their industry, and have really changed things and made things better for us. And so we say, who qualifies as a trailblazer? This is not a popularity contest. This is not someone who is just well known. When we go through the process of looking at who we're going to induct or who we're going to honor as a trailblazer, there is a significant story behind it. And some of the characteristics or traits that we look for are just what you see on the screen. Are they a leader in their respective field? Was there a betterment for the collective? It's not about them, it's not about a small group, it's for all of us. They mostly pioneered in uncharted territory. Many of them were first in what they did. They had respect for all humanity. And this is very important. When you go back to our We Are culture and what we stand for and how these people were servant leaders of this community, there's not a one that didn't stand up to that test. Again, inclusivity, diversity, and equity, even though we sometimes say it the other way around, being inclusive is what's most important no matter who you are, and being respectful. A change agent or a disruptor. It's not easy being a leader. It's not easy being the one that's going to raise their hand or show up to the meeting or voice an opinion or support someone else who is. Maybe you're not the one who's speaking, or maybe you're not the one who's leading, but you're supporting someone who is. And that takes a lot of encouragement and courage. Is what they're doing can be duplicated, replicated, initiated, sustainable. It's not just for a passing phase. It's not a fad. It's things that have longevity and are sustainable. Inspirational and encouragers. There's documentation of their story, and it doesn't always have to be in the newspaper or in print. Many times it's oral stories and collaborations that come together where people can justify and collaborate and say that, corroborate on what happened and how it happened. And you'll find that a little bit more with our Dockham story that many of you are familiar with. And then we focus on being a Kansas native or has a significant Kansas connection. So not every one of our trailblazers are initially from Kansas, but they have served and or significantly have a tie to our Kansas story. And so this year, 2023, this past November, and this is an annual event, we honored the following Trailblazers. And so I'm just gonna share a little bit about each one, but to tell their entire stories would take a lifetime. But we have it condensed down to about 8 to 10 minutes in our documentary that you can certainly go on our website or on YouTube and watch. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the accomplishments these people have made. So one is Karen S. Carter. And Karen Carter is a trailblazer from the business segment. She is a CEO, president of Dow Specialty Plastics and Packaging. And this is a global business, born and raised right here in Wichita, Kansas. She matriculated from Kansas schools, went to Howard University, started with Dow as an intern, and now she is global worldwide and has used her platform to make significant change, not only in Dow, but also with other organizations who are following their lead to see how they can be more inclusive, how they can really optimize their organizations through doing the work that she's doing with them. Brian Alexander Morgan, also from Wichita, and just because several people this year have been from Wichita, that doesn't mean that we don't look at trailblazers from across the state, because we do. And in fact, our trailblazer count to this day over the last 25 years that we've been doing this is almost close to 100 people. So it's very hard to select a few folks to just share a little bit of information today. But one of the things that we're going to do in the future is have a comprehensive display that will allow you to come in and see all of our trailblazers over the past years and their story and their image, and be able to learn more about them. And so that's one of the things that will be coming in the future. But Brian was very significant in the music industry in California in 1990s to present day. And he's in R&B and in some of the rap and some of the other areas. But he, as a songwriter and a producer, has really put Kansas on the map with the work that he's done. He's worked with some of the most famous folks, Drake for one, some of R&B groups in the 90s and 2000s. And he, a very quiet person and doesn't say much. And you know, one of the things I notice about a lot of trailblazers, most of them are very humble in spirit. When you talk with them and when you learn about them, they are not the ones that are normally out sharing information. You have to kind of dig, claw, and find out who they are. But their work stands for them. John McClendon, his family was an exoduster, and they settled in Hiawatha, Kansas. So earlier when we saw the bill from How to Come to Kansas, his family located to Kansas, and he was a part of that. He's now deceased. But he is famous for being the first African-American professional basketball coach. And went to KU, and he studied under Coach John Naismith. I'm sorry?
James.
Thank you, James Naismith, thank you. So you can tell I'm not in sports. Thank you, Brad. And held what he called and he was the first professional coach, held what they called the secret game in North Carolina in 1944 between Duke University and let's see here, North Carolina Central. And at that time, it was illegal for these games to be played. It was under lock and key. It was supposed to be secret, but of course it did get out. But this changed the way sports was viewed. Not only that, he was very instrumental in developing different passes with basketball, and he has basically revolutionized the game, all from Kansas. And again, on our Trailblazers Hall of Fame, you can hear that. The Honorable Gwen E. Berzer from Kansas City, Kansas, Topeka, and Wichita, Kansas. She is our federal magistrate judge. She has a wonderful, I would consider a tender story about going through these challenges as she was making her way to becoming a professional in law and a judge. But the thing is that she helped so many people along the way, putting others first while she was making her journey with many, many obstacles. And for her to sit on this bench at this time is really an honor. Doris Kerr Larkin's Rising Star Award. What is that? Well, these are the folks that we are looking at in the community who are younger, who may not have a long history of having trailblazing activities under their belt yet, but they are certainly on their way. So if you go back to Doris Kerr Larkin, she was a fairly young woman too when she stood up and did her first civic duty, if you will. And we wanted to honor her and keep her story going in a manner that would really allow people not only to know her, especially young people, because you know, as you get younger and people move on, you don't hear much about their stories anymore. But the other part is that what she did in her period of life is pretty much what they're doing in theirs. So these young ladies, Deborah Gladney and Angela Mawese Hall, these sisters, really young, actually started a company called Quick Hire during COVID. And that has now evolved into a global company called WorkTorch. And so with them, and any of our Rising Star Awards, which we started in 2019, we always look for a young person who is showing promise and dedication into the community. And you know, eventually they will certainly have the resume of a trailblazer, but we want to honor them early on and give them the encouragement and the acknowledgement that they deserve. So here's a few folks I just pulled out that I just wanted to just highlight real quickly. Because all of this that we're talking about today didn't start today. There were folks who were starting and seeding into this many, many years ago. And so one of them is Curtis McClinton, 1958 House Representative, and he served in the state Senate from 1964 to 1968. When we talk about our legislators today, and we're familiar with them and all the work that they're doing, it started with folks like Mr. McClinton, who during a time of civil rights and during a time when it was, I think he was the first African American to serve. Is that right, Mr. Stone? Yeah. And the first senator for sure. And, you know, during a time when it probably wasn't easy to have representation. But because representation was so necessary, not only for us, but for everyone, we honor the fact that he did. He actually was involved with passing the State Public Accommodations Act. And so again, with all of that, as he served, he really paved the way for some others. Another one is one of my favorites is Mr. Billy McCray. And Billy McCray actually has a legacy that's still going on today. Again, he was another gentleman who, as a young person growing up, if you knew him, he was always writing an editorial. My dad used to make us read those things in the Wichita Eagle because he had one almost every other week. Am I correct on that?
Yes, yes.
He knew the power of the pen, how to voice and raise questions, and you talk about being a disruptor. A very kind gentleman. I mean, I don't think I've ever saw him get upset during the time that I knew him, and maybe Mr. Stone knew him differently, but he was an awesome gentleman. But he always was writing an editorial. And I said, okay, here's an editorial, you need to read it, let's discuss it. But the fact that he knew where to put the question and knew how to raise the consciousness of our community and use the tools that was there before us. It's not about like what happens today, you just put random thoughts out there. They were always well thought out. They were always something that made you think. There was always an action that could be taken if you were so inclined. And if not, there was always a challenge. So he was a civic and political trailblazer. He also served in our legislation. He served 6 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate. And he wrote many, many books. One of the things that we can attribute to Mr. Billy McCray today is that our publication, The Community Voice, was started by him and is now owned by the Gooch family. But he started that publication many years ago and then sold it as he got busy with other things. One that we're probably really familiar with is Dr. Ron Walters, again, another political and civic trailblazer. And in fact, several years ago, Public Library was named after him over on Harry Street. Again, he was another young person at one time who stood up and saw a need, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You probably know the story about the Dockham sit-in, but really later in life, as he was going through living on the East Coast and serving in many political circles, serving as a commentary to raise awareness, writing many books. He was an excellent orator. He was a person who really made Kansas proud. But you know, until recent, I don't know how much we really celebrated him as he was doing global work. He was the profession chair of Afro Studies at Brandeis University. He's also taught political science at Syracuse and at Princeton. He was at Harvard. And then he was a member of the American Political Science Association as part of the governing council. And again, on the forefront of many political initiatives throughout his lifetime, served as a campaign manager for Jesse Jackson, and then for other congressmen who were making political moves. So this is a good segue into our Dockham drugstore. And I know that we're much more aware of Dockham than we have ever been over the past 4 or 5 years, because it was brave folks at the Kansas African American Museum and the NAACP who knew of this story and wanted to make sure that this story was elevated to national prominence. Because really it's Greensboro, North Carolina who gets all the credit for being the first drugstore sit-in, but it actually happened here several years earlier in Wichita, Kansas, by students who were brave enough to want to make change, who took the time to teach themselves and to organize and strategize. And you know, when you really think about these young folks who are in high school, who have the audacity to come together and figure it out and figure this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it, and then execute it with excellence, that is absolutely amazing, because I can't imagine what power it took to be so disciplined at a young age. And go ahead.
Dr. Ron Walters was part of that too.
Yes, absolutely. He served as the president of the youth group of NAACP. His cousin Carol Parks was part of that as well, and many others. And so this story in itself is an entire complete program. But I did want to bring that up because some of the earlier folks that I talked about, all of this snowballs and leads into change. You see one person doing it, you'll get another. And that's why these trailblazers and highlighting them is so important. Again, the story, we know it was a 3-week demonstration. We don't like to call it a protest, but a demonstration of desegregating the lunch counter, led by Ms. Carol Parks, sitting at the counter first, asking to be served and being denied. And then the process goes through. And then as we've talked with people who were involved, and unfortunately we're losing many of those folks now. They're moving on, they're passing on. But part of this question is, did it really happen, or how did it happen, because it wasn't necessarily documented in the newspapers. And you know what? This is where these oral stories come in, and this is where the firsthand experiences are so important. I know Dr. Vesey definitely keeps this program in the forefront of the community and many others, and we appreciate him because it's a lot of work to do so. And he was also a part of this, and I don't know, I believe he was one of the speakers in the series. But if you have not heard him speak from a firsthand experience, I encourage you to do so, because it is so enlightening and emotional that as I'm watching and listening to him, how were you at 17, 18 years old doing this? And in retrospect, things are different, but what courage did that take? So after 3 weeks, it ended after the owner said that he was losing too much money, and of course this set a wave to where or a blueprint, if you will, where other communities were following this this brave act. They use this as a blueprint or a model to improve upon, and by the time you get to Greensboro, it was probably refined pretty well. This is really the only known picture that we have. And then this is a picture in 2014 when the participants were honored. And that's Ms. Hahn up front for those who don't know. Ron Walters is the second gentleman standing there with the award. And then you can see many other dignitaries and participants. Not all our Trailblazers are African American. And again, Kansans who had a significant contribution or were part of the civil rights to move things forward. So Miss Fern Merrifield Van Giesen, who passed I think last year, she was instrumental in becoming a Trailblazer because she was one of the co-founders of the local urban league with the African American community. And so she was honored, I believe, in 2014 as a Trailblazer by the Kansas African American Museum. But she also was an advocate for many other social and political areas such as voting rights and LGBTQ and many other. Anyone who was underserved, marginalized, or basically not accepted in main society, she was an advocate for them. Right now, we're hearing a lot of information about the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, and Reverend Oliver Brown, who was a welder in Topeka, was the major plaintiff of that Brown versus Board of Education. And just wanted to point out from Topeka, again, another opportunity where things are not right and we're going to stand up and come together with the community. He was not the only one. This was actually a national lawsuit. But being Brown being the first one, it was named after him. But his daughters, Cheryl and Linda, were not able to go to the school that they wanted to go to, had to walk many blocks to one that was not in their neighborhood because of segregation. James Reeb, who was born in Wichita, Kansas. He was a Unitarian minister. And he served as a civil rights activist along with Martin Luther King. He was part of the clergy that was called down to help with the situation in Selma with the sanitation workers and walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I think the second night that he was there, he was killed by some white supremacists because he was participating in this protest. And with that, he left behind 4 children. But the call, when Dr. Martin Luther King made the call to clergy to come join as they were trying to make this situation right, he was one that answered the call, again from Wichita, Kansas, born here, and served in many other areas before he joined them in Selma and lost his life. Well, not all Trailblazers are part of the political fabric. You could be a Trailblazer, again, as you saw with John McClendon, but also in sports. And one of my favorite folks is Lynette Woodard, and I always like to try to highlight her as well, again from Wichita, Kansas. Had a stellar career in sports and was one of the first woman Harlem Globetrotter. Another from Wichita, Kansas, and many people had not heard her story, was June Bacon Bursey. We highlighted her a couple of years ago as the first African American meteorologist in the 70s. She attended East High School, went to Friends University for a couple of years. They were trying to steer her into the traditional home economics line of study, but she wanted to be a meteorologist, wanted to be in sciences. Transferred over to UCLA and became not only the first meteorologist of African American descent, but also a chief meteorologist within a couple of years. Her story is phenomenal. She went on to serve in some of the areas, like you see here, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NASA, and other spaces. But what she's most known for in a lot of the African American circles and those who are meteorologists or in those sciences is that she was on a show called $128,000 Question One, and took the funds to seed into Jackson State University to build out their lab for meteorologists. And Jackson State University graduates more African Americans and more people of color in meteorology than any other university. And she passed 2019 at 90 years old. And again, she's in our 2022 Trailblazers. So when you go on our website, you'll see 4 different segments, and her story, her complete story is there as well. And again, from Wichita, Kansas, many people don't know about her. She was born and raised here. So those are just a few. Like I said, we have over 100 people who are part of our Trailblazer inductee network, and to try to select a handful was just very hard to do. But with that, our future is going to allow us to have all of our Trailblazers highlighted in a digital format when we get to our new location. So some of you know that we have embarked on a campaign to relocate. While our current building has served us well and it's going to be very hard for us to leave, we do know that in the future, in order to do the work that we need to do, we need to be in a different space. And so this is the location that I just wanted to share with you. And this is just a rendering, a mock-up of what we're going to hopefully look like when we get to the corner of First and Main. It will double our space and allow us to have specific area for technology, learning, and training and development. And these are just a few renderings of what we think it may look like as we move forward. We'll have a cultural center and it will have an education center for kids. Our capital campaign, we've had an aggressive goal of 6 million. We're a little bit over 5 in gifts and pledges, and we hope that we will be making some headway soon. So what I wanted to share here is how do you get engaged if you wanted to learn more about the museum. And of course, these are one of the 4 different ways that we encourage people just to become a member and come on down. Or we do have a leadership society that helps us with our programs and our exhibitions. We have the capital campaign, which is for the new building, and then organizations, individuals and families. If you have family reunions and organizations, you want to learn more, just give us a call. But we're still here. And so I extended the invitation earlier. If you have not had a chance to come down, we invite you to come at any time from Tuesday to Friday from 10 to 5, and then on Saturday from noon to 4. And that pretty much kind of concludes what I wanted to share with you today. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I don't have a question, but a comment that Ron Walters was also a consultant with President Clinton.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Ron Walters was a consultant with President Clinton. And we have several Trailblazers within our list that have had political assignments or consultancies with presidents. They're very engaged on a higher level. That's when you can really truly be proud about national and global presence that we have, because these folks are sought out to consult and be a part of a larger landscape. When I shared earlier that the museum is somewhat global. It's through our Trailblazer production that we do every year. In November, we broadcast this on TV in Wichita, Topeka, and Kansas City markets. So it's free. So if you could imagine, initially our Trailblazer event was like many events. You have a keynote speaker, you have an event at the hotel, you only have maybe 300 to 350 people who can attend, and you give your award to the recipients. But during COVID, that changed everything, and we were not able to do that. We had to come up with another way to figure out how we can keep this going. So this broadcast of 1 hour has really changed the entire dynamic for us, because now we're able to not only film and video and put these stories together with people who can share and add to the add layers to the story, because sometimes when we talk to people, they don't want to share kind of what they've done, but other people will come to say yes, this, that, and the other, and collaborate. But it really makes for a nice tool to educate and learn about history and learn about people. The other part of that, when we broadcast this, it makes it accessible to everyone. No one has to buy a ticket. You can stay at home, you can be with your friends and family and have a watch party. But now we're able to expand this service to all. And then finally, when we stream it, because we're streaming it on all of the social media platforms while we're broadcasting it, it's reaching global audiences. So we have people in Australia and Africa and Germany, England, South America, who are watching Trailblazers the same time you're watching it on your television set. And so, and then also with multiple airings, this has also allowed us to reach a broader audience. So when you're looking at 350 people for one night versus 70,000 folks in the first week, that is a tremendous reach. And we did not expect that. We had no idea that was going to happen, but that was certainly a pleasant surprise from moving into a space of uncertainty, moving into a space where we had no idea what that next, should we suspend it? Should we do this? Should we do that? It's like, no, let's give this a try. But in doing so, this has broadened our appeal. It's helped us reach mission a lot better. And now people all over the world know about Kansas and Kansans who are doing things globally. And so if there's anything that we ask that you be proud and supportive of, is this, because this represents all of us. And again, the process of going through selecting a Trailblazer for each year is very difficult, because we may have 25, 30 candidates who all meet the requirements. But, you know, narrowing that down to 4 people, 3 to 4 people, is very, very difficult for that class and for that year. One of the reasons we narrow it down that much is because we only have so much time to share their stories, and it's really kind of unfair to give someone a 2 or 3 minute segment when really 8, 9, 10, 11 minutes is really what is due. And then as we're also sharing other things about Kansas history during that same time, it takes up, it takes the entire hour. So wanted to share that it is available on our website on the page, and you can just go into the link and watch the segment for 2023 or any of our past segments and learn probably things you had no idea about people who were Trailblazers. Yes, sir.
I expected to see Chester I. Lewis on.
That was a struggle. There was about 6 or 7 of them I cut because I wasn't sure how much time I had. And if you have not been to the Reflection Park, and we do a lot around Chester I. Lewis, and it was hard to kind of cut back, but we wanted to highlight a few other people that probably most folks didn't know anything about or hadn't heard about them in a long time, and so just trying to have a balance. But no, definitely no disrespect to Chester I. Lewis, because he was definitely a favorite of our museum. Yes?
When do you normally do the new Trailblazers, like?
It airs in November.
Oh, okay.
Airs the 2nd or no later than the 3rd week of November, depending on what airtime we can get. This year it'll probably be, it's right after the elections. So however that falls, it'll be that Friday, Saturday, Sunday of that next week is what we try to, thank you for the question. We try to get that aired before we get into the holidays, but it's always available. It's evergreen now. So again, the money that we spend and the support that we get, really, you couldn't get a better way to have history available without having to research it yourself, because we do all that for you.
Did you say what network it's on?
Actually, KWCH is our partner on this particular program. And Miss Felicia Roth is our host every year. And she ushers us in throughout the program and does a fabulous job with the stories. So again, from 2020 to 2023, so right now we're working on 2024. And we will broadcast in November again for the next year.
Are there tours connected with TCAM to the Chester Lewis area downtown?
Yeah, we have so many different things in the works, Mr. Stone. So we have a statewide trail that we put together several years back, and because of COVID, we have not been able to reinstate that, but we are looking to do that this next year, where we would take groups with us and go to some of the other sites across the state that have Kansas African American history. And then we also had at one time a walking tour that was around the area of the museum, where we were identifying some of the businesses and houses and points of interest in that area. And right now, when you walk that area, you know, it's kind of disorienting, but you can't imagine who was here and who was there. And that app is no longer active. And so we're looking at how we can, you know, fix that, and then maybe connect to some of the other tours, because there's the Redbud Trail and there's other tours and trails, and it would really like to be our goal to connect all of them. So if you look at Douglas now, it's really becoming a really nice corridor for African American history, because a lot of things took place there with the Chester I. Lewis Park. That makes it makes sense, right? From the Ambassador to where the Dockham sit-in, and then the Rexall drugstore, and then you have the Chester I. Lewis and several other points that are starting to develop. And then you go around the corner, and then here will be. So that is one of the things that we have on our plans, to figure out how to have all these connecting trails, so you can start anywhere and kind of figure out where you want to go and learn more.
One other thing, the development on Douglas, right off the corner of Douglas and Main, how is that moving forward? Or
Are you talking about the Dockham Park area that they're working on?
Yes.
I have not had an update on that. That project is being led by the NAACP and the city of Wichita. Yeah, but as far as I know, it's still moving forward. Like anything, it takes time, money, and planning, and they always go a lot slower than you want and cost more than you should. But when we get there, we're all victorious, right? Yeah. So, but again, it's going to make a nice learning opportunity. Because many of you may not know that even with the Articles of Incorporation, when Wichita was signed to become a city, there was an African American who was involved in that, who signed those Articles of Incorporation. And Mr. Robinson, as we share at the museum, we share that information, but you normally don't hear it anywhere else. And so those are all these little fine points that that we feel that it is our duty to make sure that we get this information out as much as we can. Any other questions? Yes.
First and Main, do you know when you'll go into that building? And I can't place which corner of that.
Sure, I can help you place that. So First and Main is right there on the corner. It's right across from Bear Trust Bank, and they just finished across where the old Commerce used to be. They've made that the National. It's now a I think it's apartments or something, and then there's some there's a parking garage directly across. So right here at the Advanced Library, if you go up over the bridge, and then you go over the bridge, you'll see a white building. That building at First and Main, that is us. And then the next would be the Lux, and then the next would be the Orpheum, and then the Scottish Rite. So we're just right up the space there.
Which corner would
And we are on the northwest corner.
So when it's built, and that will be open approximately.
I wish it was open tomorrow, but.
Is it gonna be 5
They're still
years?
raising money.
No, we are aggressively moving forward with this, and I would hope that 2025 you'll see movement. How about that? Yeah, it needs to happen. And again, the building has served us well where we are, but you know, technology is a big part of what we want to do in the future, and we just can't make that happen where we are. Space is very much a challenge. And then simple things like access, you know, elevator, we don't have that to the second. There's just a lot of challenges, and so moving into this new space will eliminate all of that. But more importantly, it will be a draw for the community, for people to come in. And so if we have opportunities just like this, and we are certainly going to take advantage of our partnerships with the library and any other groups that we work with for space when we have outgrown our space. But and it makes total sense. But it also allows us to have better collaborations too. And so that is one thing that we have strived to do in the past couple of years, is to work with within our art and cultural community and learning institutions to have these collaborations. And parts of the story can be in different places as we collectively share messaging, whatever we're working on. So that makes total sense.
Did the museum get any of Gordon Parks' items?
We have a robust collection of Gordon Parks originals, and yeah,
Storage?
in our vault. We put them out. We do a Gordon Parks about every 18 to 24 months.
Oh, okay.
And we don't have one scheduled for this year, but about every 18 to 24 months, our curator will come together with a story. The last one was involved some photography, some pieces that he did in his New York apartment. And the name of the exhibition escapes me, but we try to. But then there's also other museums that do Gordon Parks as well. And then if you have not been, have you been to the Gordon Parks Museum in Fort Scott?
No, but I
Got to go. That is a trip to make, and we have taken groups there. And again, we're going to try to revitalize our tour. But that is a treat within itself. That's our purpose in being a comprehensive museum is not to tell everyone else's story in completion. It's to encourage you to go to those places. So go to Nicodemus, go to Osawatomie, go to Topeka. The Brown versus Board of Education Museum is very immersive. I mean, when you get in that space, you learn a lot about that time period and what they went through. We share, but we're not here to take there. So we do have Gordon Parks, and we do talk about him, and we do share, but we encourage you to go there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Yeah.
Years back, we went with the museum to DC with the youth groups. I know they're not functional now, but are there any plans to bring back that type of
Yeah,
activity?
we would love to. When we get to our new space and we're able to, you know, facilitate those, absolutely. Those trips are very important. So she's speaking of the trip that I think it was 2017 or something like that, 2016, 2017. We took, the museum took a group of youth to DC, and of course we had community leaders join us as well. Those trips, even when we make the small state trips, those are important when we bring young people in with our elders, because you'll find that while they're, and I like to observe, when they're in these spaces, you'll hear comments from the young folks, and you'll hear comments from the older, and then they start talking to each other. And by the time the trip is over, there's been this opportunity to engage. That may or may not happen at any other time, but when it's centered around interest or history or events or a person, there's a lot of magic that happens. So we always encourage, even with our senior Wednesdays, we're part of the Senior Wednesday program, and we host it the 5th Wednesday of every month at 10. We encourage young people to come. If there's a class that wants to sit in during the Senior Wednesday, by all means bring them, because the questions that are asked and the curiosity and sometimes just the clarification is amazing to see all that happen. So it's not exclusive to seniors, even though that's our focal, and you all do Senior Wednesdays too. We try to get young people to come. But the trips are really magical because you're in this confined space and they're looking and you're looking and now we're talking. You know, what is that? That's a phone. What does it do? You know, it's a dial. You know, then this conversation goes, you know, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, that's how it was. Something as simple as that will start a robust conversation.
I was just thinking that, the museum, when it moves, it'll be a very strategic situation because you got the hotel, Century 2 and all that. So it's just like walk over to see.
You know what? It was part of design and part of default. And it didn't start with my tenure at 6 years. The conversation with this location really happened before I came, but it was not available. And then when it circled back around that there might be a possibility, we went for it. But yes, looking back, and it was a big risk for us to take this leap a couple of years ago. We purchased a building a couple of years ago, actually, while we're raising this money. We couldn't wait because we didn't think it would be there. And it doubles our space and it allows us to do many of the things that we can't do now. But had we waited or hesitated, we probably wouldn't be able to get it. And there's no space downtown. I think it's gonna be grander than the one we have. It almost looks like a museum now to me. I mean, in my head, I already have it mapped out now. How it ends up is another thing, but people are excited about it. And many of you may not know that location is really the original location of the White Castle Burger. That was that first in Maine was where the first White Castle was located. And so there is a plaque inside the building and we will leave it there to honor that.
I just heard, I think this morning, with the news flash, I'm not really a sports person except that I was a fan, I still am a fan of WSU's men's team. But Lynette Woodard's record has been topped.
Oh, it has? Well, I didn't know that. Okay. Wow. All righty. Well, we'll have to get that in the archives.
Yes, but they was not the 3-point shot whenever she played. And she played with the men's basketball and the women's played with the small. They didn't break anything.
So, you know, that serves as another point as to why why it's important for us to look for the future and sustainability of the museum is because these these files that we have are not digitized. And so that's another big project that we're going to move forward with is to digitize our files so that that it will be accessible for all. But right now that's not possible. So there's a lot of work ahead. There's work for decades to come. So we need to get people interested and to help and more importantly, as we're going through this year or so of transition, we do want you to come down and experience as much as you can with us.
Well, I just want to thank you for your leadership and your vision.
Thank you.
And your tenacity.
Some of our most, what do you want to call it, the strongest supporters. They're always encouraging, checking to see how you're doing, what progress we're making. You know, we've had all these small little incremental milestones met along the way, and we're gonna, come on to some areas where they'll be bigger and much more publicly, much more available to the public. But a lot has to happen on the back end, if anybody knows, on anything large that has before you ever get to the big part. And and that's what we've been working on. So it's not a secret. I mean, we're not keeping anything in secret. You can always come down and ask, and I'll tell you what I can. But mainly it's being, being logical about it and managing expectations and all the things that have to happen in order to make this new museum something that the community can be proud of and serve well. For the state of Kansas, it has to serve. And that's the main thing. Stay close to our mission and make sure we're doing the work we're supposed to do, which is work that really no one else in the community can do. I mean, it's not anyone else's work, it's our work. We're supposed to do it. I want to stop real quick. I want to acknowledge Brad Richards. Stand up, Brad. Oh. There's a reason I wanted to do that. Not only because I just love him. I'm going to just say that. He hates when I say that publicly, but I don't care. The other reason is because we made an intentional decision to make sure we're bringing young people into the fold. And so we started with our board. Our board is very well diverse, and we brought a lot of young people in, I would say 40 and under, to help us with this vision, help us with this process. Nothing wrong with those who served in the past, but we needed to expand and we needed to have other lenses and other perspectives. So that was intentional. And also been building out our board of strategic leaders and visionaries who can help us really figure out how to position this and what we want it to be. The second thing is then hiring people into the museum who are younger, who can carry the torch as we move forward. And so it's the Brads of the world. I have four, who now are part of this next leadership team that I've been working with and developing. And Brad's been with me the longest, a year and a half now. He's tolerated me a year and a half. But seriously, he has done an exceptional job. He started as a Lead for America Fellow, which is part of a leadership program for graduates. In college, he graduated from K-State Economics, a degree in economics, and went into this program called Lead for America and spent a year. He joined us at the museum under that fellowship and was able to use all of his knowledge from school and some of his talents and gifts in a leadership position. He then segued into our position of being an education specialist, and now he's our education manager, which is now helping him learn how to manage and not only projects but people. And Brad will be okay, I'm putting pressure on you. Everybody say Brad.
Right.
Brad will basically somewhat be our next level of leadership at the museum. He and his cohorts that are at the museum now. And so want to get them in on the ground floor as we're working through this process, and they can see where we're coming from. And I lean on them a lot about, okay, what would you do in your space? How do you see it? It's important because, the way I want to do it is not necessarily as progressive as maybe what they see. And so they've been very tolerant in ushering me through some of the things that I get nervous about. But we're okay, right? I'm behaving, aren't I?
Right on script.
We're making it happen. And so, but with that has really helped us move to some places and spaces that may not have happened because young people are at the table making decisions. That's what they're doing. They're executing it. And when things don't go a certain way, then they have the responsibility of editing and changing it, right? And making sure that it gets going forward. So that's the other part that's happening while we're doing this. So, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate it and hope to see you all at the museum soon. No, we're still looking for it. That was the one that was in Green Book, wasn't it? One of the older.
It was one that I was born in.
We have not. There's a lot of pictures from John.
I'm sure there are, but I just knew where it was.